It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's the Take Command podcast. Logan Paulson there, Craig Hoffman here. And Logan, it is time for one of our annual traditions around these parts. By around these parts, I mean on this podcast in June. We are going to do our positional group rankings over the next 2 Thursdays. So today will be the offense and then defense next week. We go through the NFC East. We say this is the best quarterback group. This is the best running back group. Wide receivers and tight ends we lump together. And then the offensive line as well. The last thing I will say as a precursor here in terms of kind of how this works is this is for 2025. So this is what we anticipate for this season. These are not 3 or 5 year projections. We are doing it based off what we think is going to happen in 2025. Logan, any other preamble we want to get to? Any other setup? Any other thoughts? Pretext here before we dive into the quarterbacks first.
No, I'm pretty sure you got it, but I'm sure as we're talking, it'll come to me and we'll be like, no, wait. So we'll do it when we get there.
Okay. Quarterback specifically, here's the other pretext. Like, it's who's going to play, right? And so we're not necessarily diving too deep into the depth. It's probably worth mentioning in a couple of places, but maybe it's a tiebreaker, but it really is who's your starting quarterback because injuries always are a factor for every single football season. They're impossible to predict for the most part. And so that's kind of where I sit on the quarterbacks. And I mean, a couple of years ago, Dak was the guy in this division. I think you ask most analysts around the league now, Jayden Daniels is the 5th best quarterback in the NFL, and he's the best quarterback in the NFC. That would make him the best quarterback in the NFC East. That's certainly where I'm putting the Commanders logo on this part of the slide deck, if you will. But Logan, are you in agreement there that Jayden has already ascended to QB1 in the division?
Yeah, and I think like anytime you're talking about quarterback evaluations, any criticism sounds like you're being negative. I'm just trying to make observations here because like I think Jayden Daniels is a special football player, obviously. Like,
as we talked about on the last show.
Yeah, like he's special, right? I think when it comes to like playing the position, like experience is such a huge metric and, barometer of success. So when I look at Dak and what he's done at certain points in his career, right? He's had the 4,500 yards passing. He's been close to 5,000 yards a couple times in his career. Like the way when he is on, which is, it seems like it's every other year almost, right? Because of injuries or whatever it is. Like he's a special talent at the position, right? He kind of plays the position in a more traditional way. I do think Jayden can get there. I think when you look at some stuff he did last year, you're like, oh my gosh, like look at how he's manipulating defenders with his eyes and look at the quick release and look at the ability to scramble and make good decisions. And so I definitely think long-term, the ceiling for Jayden is higher than it ever was or is for Dak. So like, for example, at the top of the show, we're like, if this was a 3-year thing, this would not be a contest, right? Because it'd obviously be Jayden. It'd be like a runaway Jayden, right? But I think it's like, where is he at right now? And I know we're anticipating a lot of growth because of the type of person that he is and the type of worker that he is, which I'm totally on board with. I think he will improve. But is he playing the quarterback position as well as Dak has played in the NFL over the course of his career? Now, and again, I'm nitpicking, or cherry picking moments.
You're trying to make this interesting versus being like, oh, it's Jayden, move on.
Yeah, right. And again, like if you're saying, hey, we're going to run a West Coast offense, I want a guy who's going to win from the pocket, throw the ball over the middle of the field, like win outside, like that's what Dak is, and like that archetype for the position isn't really as valuable as anymore, right? Because look at the guys that are the top guys, right? Outside of Joe Burrow, it's Josh Allen, great athlete, great runner. Lamar Jackson, great athlete, great runner. Patrick Mahomes, sneaky athlete, good runner. And again, Dak is kind of on the outside of like the modern transition to the quarterback position. So like if you said, hey, we're going to win from the pocket, maybe it's Dak, but like Jayden's not bad at that. And he's a much more dynamic athlete. So that's where I just say like he to me is the closest one. And we'll talk about Jalen Hurts here in a second, but I just wanted to bring that up. Like I think Jayden is a fine answer, but I think it depends on if you were to ask a coach, right? Like what do you want this offense to be? There are probably, I don't know, let's say there's 32 teams in the NFL. There's probably 5-10 teams that'll say I'd prefer Dak because of what he does from the pocket. Like if you're in Detroit, the way they run that offense, you probably want Dak, right? But if you're Baltimore, obviously you'd say Jayden. So like I think it's stylistically there's an element here, but not to be too biased, but I'm probably gonna say Jayden Daniels.
And the value of the scramble is so high. I mean, the EPA per play stuff last year when he scrambles is crazy. Like how it contributes to points is just, it's undeniable at this point. We have the data. That discussion you just had in terms of style and situation, to me, actually makes it an argument between 2 and 3 of Hurts and Prescott as well. I think Jayden is the clear-cut number 1. I think Dak, what Dak does from the pocket and all that kind of stuff, if you gave Jayden the training camp in the spring and told him that's how he had to operate, like, I think he could probably do it. He's also not asked to do that, so we're kind of evaluating there's only so much here we're separating quarterback from system, because we're kind of ranking like how we feel about the room as is for 2025.
Sure.
So to me, like, Jayden's the clear-cut number 1 because of that. And I don't think you disagree, especially if you take in like Jayden in his situation versus Dak in his situation. I trust Jayden in his situation.
That was the other thing I want to bring up too. Like, in terms of elevating a group, like, I don't know if there was a quarterback in the NFL last year who elevated a group more than what he did last year in Washington. And I'm not saying that was like there's bad skill position players, but I think when you look at the offensive line, the way that Adam has upgraded this offseason, like, obviously they felt that was something that needed to be improved upon. He made that group better, right? He made the running backs better. He made the receivers better. Like, I love OZ. I love Jamison Crowder, and I love De'Ami Brown, right? He got those guys all paid, right? And that's what good
Right.
quarterbacks do, right? There's a reason that everyone left New England and was not quite as good as receivers afterwards, because Tom Brady was special, right? He was able to elevate talent. So I think that's another thing just to call attention to here, like in this argument of like styles or whatever. I don't know if there was a quarterback who elevated it. Like I think we were talking about this on the show last year. Like, is he an MVP? And to me, he was borderline in terms of this roster, this team, the situation, because of what he was able to elevate, what he was able to get out of the offense. And again, there's Cliff's fingerprints are all over that. Like, so Cliff deserves a ton of credit, no doubt. But I just think that's an interesting kind of dynamic there too. Is like, could Dak Prescott come here last year with the offensive line the way it was, with the skill positions the way it was, and make what Jayden Daniels made? And I don't think so. So
no. Which gets us to Jalen Hurts, because I think in like 28 spots, Jalen Hurts is very clear. Like, he presents as a mid-tier quarterback, which is probably much more what he is. Dude, in Philadelphia, he's so perfect for what they do, because his big weakness is he stands in the pocket forever. And the processing is not as quick. He takes his time. But when you have their offensive line, like, that kind of doesn't matter. And he's a tremendous deep ball thrower who's willing to take those shots to the outside. He elevates their run game in a major way with his own legs. He also has such a great command at the line of scrimmage of getting them in the right play, which is such an underrated but very important part of quarterbacking. Dak is a better passing game quarterback. Like, if you just isolate the passing game, it's not remotely close.
An easy way to compare it, right, is who was the OC there last year? Moore?
Kellen Moore,
Yeah, I kept wanting to say Dan. I was like, that's the offensive lineman. So Kellen Moore, right? Kellen Moore in with Dak. Like, Dak was almost a 5,000-yard passer, right? Like, he was able to do more. The ball velocity, the anticipation was better. Excuse me. And then when you look at, Moore in Philly with Hurts, like, that offense looked awkward at moments, right? Because of what you were talking about in terms of Hurts' limitations. So I think the thing that I come back to here is like Hurts, the leadership, like kind of the competitor, like, it's obviously a very high thing, but there's not a better situation for a quarterback. Like, we're going to rank the rest of this thing, but like,
right,
you're going to find 2 better wide receivers. You're going to find a better tight end. You're going to find a better, like, offensive line running back. Like, you are surrounded in a perfect ecosystem to be the best version of yourself. So I say, like, if you took, hypothetically, Dak Prescott and put him in Philly, what does that offense look like? And it kind of reminds me of Dak, like, what was that, probably 5 years ago when they had the best offensive line in football.
Well, yeah, it's how he succeeded as a rookie. It was 2016. He takes over for Romo, and he takes over Romo like from game one, because Romo gets hurt in the preseason. And he throws for 3,600 yards, 23 touchdowns, 4 picks as a rookie.
Yeah.
And it's the highest QB rating he had until 2023 when he damn near won MVP. Like, he was awesome.
Yeah. And so this is why it's hard for me. Like, I understand there are limitations to Jalen Hurts, and there are things that, like, as a competitor and as a leader, that make him really dynamic in that environment. But there's a reason that the passing game is so kind of up and down, right? It's because he has a hard time anticipating throws over the middle of the field. And they rely on these deep shots down the field, which we talked about on the last show, like are very an inconsistent metric, right? An inconsistent offensive production metric, right? And so I think you're always riding a certain level of variance with him, and he's able to succeed there because he doesn't have to win the game for you. You have Saquon, you have other elements. And then I say that, but then watch him in the playoff game, man. He was excellent in that game.
He's a big game player, and he's had a long history of doing that.
And so this is not to say he's a bad player, but I just think about if Dak's in that offense, like, are they the best? Are they definitively the best team? Are they kind of like what the offense in Detroit was last year, where it's like the pass protection is excellent, Jared Goff's ripping you apart, you got explosive playmakers down the field. I think that's what you get from the quarterback spot. Now it's a team game, but I think that's where I kind of settle and say, man, like, situation's so good. What does Dak look like there? And it's one of those hypotheticals you never know, but I think Dak's going to be a better player in that environment.
Yeah. Since 2019, it's been every other year for Dak. 2019, he played all 16 games, throws for almost 5,000 yards. 2020, he gets hurt. 2021, he's back at it, almost 4,500 yards. 2022, he misses 4 games and is just generally has a down year, throws 15 interceptions in those 12 games. Bounces back in 23. He's incredible, 36-9. And then last year, he misses half the season. So it's 2025. It's an odd year. Dak's going to be awesome. I would. Like, I do wonder if, like, we're starting to see the end of Dak's prime here. You know,
Sure.
he's getting into his mid-30s. And the offensive line is not what it used to be. I just want to stress that I think it's really close. I think you're right. I think you still have to put Dak as number 2 here, purely on the quarterback. But it's really close. And, like, if we're ranking quarterbacks in the entire league, I don't know how much further down Hurts is than Prescott. And it just so happens that they're in the same division.
I think it goes back to stylistically, like what you're looking for.
Of course.
And that's where it's like, if you're not a top 4 or 5 guy in the league, like, you are a little bit scheme dependent. And I think that's what you're seeing here a little bit. And so, like, I'm just saying, like, Kellen Moore has been with both of them. The offense looked drastically different in both environments. And I think a lot of it has to do with the person that's throwing the football. Now, like you said, maybe this is the downside of Dak's career. He's got him negotiating injuries all the time. We'll see what happens. But, and again, I think people have a hard time with this conversation because the contract number Dak is at, like,
that's also
he's
100% true. For value purposes, it's Hurts. Quarterback play per dollar, it's Hurts.
Yeah, for sure. But I do think if you're just looking at down-to-down stuff, like, he does a really good job. He does a really good job on the down-to-down stuff of playing quarterback. Now, like, there's more to it than that. There's the leadership, the competitor, the toughness, the scrambling for 20 on, whatever. Like, and Hurts brings that.
The command of the offense in general, like play to play. Are you in the right play, whether or not you execute it?
I mean, and be fair to Jalen, man, like, I was on the sideline in that playoff game, and his ability to be like, oh, this is the coverage, this is what we're going to check to, or this is the front, we're going to check to this. Yep. Like, he was locked in. And so obviously he's doing good stuff. This is not an indictment of him as a player. I just think if you're throwing the football, which is a big part of playing quarterback, I think you probably want to go Dak.
Yeah. Then there's the Giants. Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Jackson Dart, Tommy DeVito. What a quarterback room.
It's definitely got the most character, I would say. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Characters. It's got the most characters.
Say, like, we didn't talk about this, so we can just hit this real quick. I do think all those first 3 groups we talked about have a really good backup situation too, right? Like, and they're good for different ways, right? Like, Joe Milton in Dallas, right, is interesting. Yeah. I think
interesting is a good word.
Who's the kid from Stanford?
Tanner McKee.
Tanner McKee, I love him. Like, he looks like he's going to be playing starting minutes here, not for Philly, but for some organization at some point down the road. And then obviously Marcus Mariota and the backup quarterback room they have here is great.
Yeah.
And then you get to the Giants, and there's really not, I don't say there's nothing positive, but I hate it. You know what I mean? Like, I hate everything about it. Like, I love Jameis Winston. I used to be the biggest Russell Wilson fan. Like, he beat us in 2012 when I was here, and I was like, this dude's awesome. He was awesome for about 8-9 years after that. Everybody's kind of well aware of his decline since then. But Jackson Dart was a developmental guy that they took at 25 that feels like there's a lot of work that needs to happen to make him there. And Dayball's done that before, but yeah, man. Like, it's and then Cutlets, like, they all have their own little thing that they got going on there. So
yeah, to me, the Giants are a dangerous team this year in that any week, like, if Jameis gets on one or Russ gets on one, or if Dart's playing and he gets on one, like, they've got enough talent that they could beat anybody any week. They're an any given Sunday team. Week to week, they're probably going to be really bad.
Yeah.
Because I don't trust any of it to happen consistently.
No, I'm with you, man. Like that is a tough room, and I don't think we're saying anything super surprising here. But
no.
and again, like I'm fans of all those guys. Like like when Jameis is playing, like I'm watching the game. I go back and watch.
But you're
Jameis
watching
games.
because you don't know what you're going to get.
Correct.
And it's going to be entertaining, not necessarily good. Take Command Podcast, NFC East Divisional Position Rankings Edition. We've got to come up with a better name. That's Logan. I'm Craig. Let's take a look now at the second most important part of an offense, Logan. No, not the skill positions. It's the offensive line. So real quick, just to run it down the way ESPN.com has the depth charts right now. The Commanders across the front from left to right. Tunsil, Allegretti, Biotish, Cosme, asterisk, Connerly. Obviously, Cosme, as everyone listening to this podcast probably knows, is out for a while with that torn ACL. It's to be some combination of Andrew Wiley, Nick Allegretti, and Brandon Coleman. I don't know why ESPN changed. They used to have it with Coleman at left guard, but it's going to be Tunsil, Coleman, Biotish, Allegretti, Wiley, or Nate Erbig, and then Josh Connerly at right tackle. For Philadelphia, Mailata at left tackle, Dickerson, Juergens, that's all the same. Tyler Steen currently listed as the right guard as the starter, replacing Mekhi Becton, who left in free agency, and then Lane Johnson, the future Hall of Famer. The Cowboys, Tyler Guyton, Tyler Smith, Cooper Beebe, Tyler Booker, Terrence Steele. 3 Tylers along your offensive line. Gotta love it. And then the Giants have Andrew Thomas, John Runyon Jr., John Michael Schmitz, Greg Van Roten, Jermaine Eluminor. That's how the O-lines stack up. Philly, congrats. You win again.
Yeah, and I think the one kind of, hole, the gap in the armor here is probably that right guard spot with Tyler Steen, who I think has played well when he's been called upon, but definitely not as well as Mekhi Becton played last year. And I think the thing about them, Philly, is they always seem to just accrue and accumulate depth really well. Like Matt Pryor, he played left tackle for, I want to say the Colts last season, was fine. But to me, he's always been a guard. He's like 6'8", he's like 370. He's a massive, massive human being. And they just find these dudes. And so if Tyler Steen's not playing well, here's a guy that's played a lot. He's played in Philly before.
They also traded for Kenyon Green, who played a ton of minutes for Houston.
Former first-round pick who was a disaster in Houston. But I think the talent there, in conjunction with the offensive line coach, you're like, well, maybe this thing turns around. And then Miles Hilton, a guy they drafted in the 5th round for tackle out of Michigan, I think would be an excellent fill-in for guard. He's long, he's big, he's heavy, he's strong, he's well coached, he's got a tremendous pedigree. So
by the way, early reports on Hinton are that people are like, oh my God, this is Mailata all over again. Like the way he moves is sick.
So it was so funny, and I'm not gonna the draft season's funny to me, right? It's just a funny time of year for me. So I remember going through guys, and I was just like, let's check out this Miles Hilton guy. And he was on nobody's radar. No one was talking about him. And I was like, this dude's a starting, guard tackle in the NFL, right now. And why are we not talking about him in the 3rd or 4th round? And of course, Philly ends up with him. So you're like, right, he's going to go into a great system, a great environment, can develop for a year. So whatever. But the point is not only do they have an issue at right guard potentially, and I like Tyler Steen. I liked him coming out of Alabama a couple years ago.
Yeah.
They have contingencies if it doesn't go well. So that's why they're number one. And and as long as Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata are there, they're going to be probably number one for the foreseeable future. I mean, Landon Dickerson is a borderline Pro Bowl guard. What are we talking about?
And they have
here?
Jeff Stoutland as the O-line coach. All right. Who's 2? Did Washington do enough to become the second best O-line in the division?
I was just looking through this, and I think yes. We got to tread softly here, and I'm going to tell you why. So obviously, Laramie Tunsil, I think now is probably in contention for a conversation anyway about the best left tackle in the division, right? So that's awesome. Now you go Mailata, you go Andrews up in New York, whatever you want to do there, but he's close, right? So then you say, if Brandon Coleman plays the way I think he can at left guard, man, that's going to be a really interesting dynamic. Tyler Biotish is, in my opinion, one of the best centers in the division. Cosme is one of the best guards in the division when healthy. Obviously, he's hurt right now, but Wiley at guard, I love that as well in terms of depth we've talked about. And then where's Connerly at is the $1 million question for me. So the thing is, from a talent standpoint, you're like, yeah, let's get this thing cooking. The problem is Brandon Coleman's playing a new position, right? Your starting right guard is hurt. And then you've got a rookie starting at right tackle. So how do you feel about that? Obviously, on paper, when you look at their 40s and watch their arm length and how they move in space and watch them do all the run blocking stuff they do in training camp, you're like, man, this is going to be the second best group in football. But you get a guy who's never played NFL football before and a guy who's playing a new position and then a backup playing right. So that's where I'd say, like, on paper, I'm like, absolutely, hell yes. Yeah. But there are some question marks for sure.
Is Dallas the team that they are competing with? Are the Giants just sitting at the bottom of another offensive ranking here? Or did they do enough bringing in a guy like Van Roten, getting some upgrades with Runyon? Like, did they do enough to at least get in the conversation here?
So Dallas to me is really interesting, and I'll tell you why. So obviously you got Terrence Steele, right, who has been banged up and hasn't quite looked like the guy that they paid, right? So where is he at? Like, every year I watch him, I'm like, man, it looks like he's fine, but like, where's he at? You know what I'm saying? Right now he's a serviceable starting right tackle. You're starting Tyler Booker at right guard, who is a rookie. And what was my concern about the Commanders' offensive line is that he's a rookie. You're starting Cooper Beebe at center, who's a second-year player. Again, there's some developmental curve there. Tyler Smith, I think, is maybe the best guard in the division, so we'll give him that. And then Tyler Guyton, who struggled tremendously at points last year, like really, really struggled. So to me, I kind of say to myself, 3 of those spots are not great, in terms of confidence in terms of young players going into year 2. So in one case, it's a rookie. Like, that just seems tough to me. And then when you look at New York, just by comparison, I think New York is maybe a little bit more consistent. So and you can tell me if I'm wrong, Craig, but the way I look at it is like, Jermaine Eluemunor, I think, is a good starting right player. And I personally think he's better than Terrence Steele right now at this point in his career, right?
Yeah.
Greg Van Roten, I think, is fine. Like, he's kind of a wash, but he has the experience on his side, and I think he's going to be better than Tyler Booker, right? John Michael Schmidt is in his 3rd year, I want to say, maybe 4th year, and has struggled. But is there a noticeable difference between him and Cooper Beebe? I would say probably not at this point. John Runyon is fine. He's a get-on-base kind of guard. I think they could definitely get better there, but he's a get-on-base kind of guy. Then you maybe have one of the better tackles in the division, Andrew Thomas. So, I don't know. That feels on paper like a more consistent group than Dallas. There's less question marks to me in this group. And with an offensive line, I think you want consistency. You want guys that have done it. Guys that have experience. And I'm not sure Dallas has that.
So let me help you parse through your thoughts here with a question. Are we not giving Dallas's floor enough credit because New York's ceiling is lower? In other words, are we looking at New York and being like, there's not a lot of variance here. We think they're fine, and at best, they're a little better than fine. Versus Dallas, where it's like, at worst, what are you? At your best, you're actually really good. Like, if Guyton clicks, if some of these guys that have higher ceilings hit their ceiling, there's a wider gap of possibilities. But if we compare floor to floor, is Dallas's significantly lower than New York's? Because if so, then we have a conversation. If not, then Dallas is obviously the correct answer with a potential to go even above Washington potentially.
I think so. And I think I'll tell you why. Like, Tyler Guyton at points last year was like non-playable. You know what I mean? Like, and it wasn't, and everyone knew he was going to be a developmental player, right? He's got everything you're looking for, but he's developmental, right? So there were times where he was benched. He's been multiple times in the course of the season because guys are just running around him, or he can't handle a bull rusher. He's got too many holding calls. He's got a false start, right? And so Tyler Booker, again, was one of the more consistent prospects from a mentality standpoint. But when you look at him, he ran like I want to say it was like a 5.4 40-yard dash.
Yeah,
his movement skills weren't good. Not very explosive. And usually those guys have a hard time in the NFL. But I think Tyler Booker's going to be okay because of the mental wiring. Yeah, but I think the lack of elite athleticism would lead me to believe that he's going to be in for a tough year. So I do think there's a world where the bottom just falls out of this thing, right? Like Cooper Beebe next to Tyler Booker, like, you're losing that support of Zach Martin to kind of help you get on the same page all the time. Like, again, Tyler Smith is a beast. Don't get me wrong. But there's just 3 young variables in there that could collapse on themselves. And then all of a sudden you're just taking away, maybe this is the 25th and below group in the NFL all of a sudden. And you're like, oh, that's not very good. Obviously.
The good news is for them that Dak is one of the best at the line of scrimmage quarterbacks in the league. Like, his mental processing helps, but it's different having that dude back in the shotgun versus Zach Martin right next to you. He's a young player, or opposite you at the other guard spot, being able to do what he can do. All right. So if that's the case, then our rankings would go Philly, Washington, New York, Dallas.
I mean, and maybe I'm being too hard on Washington or too hard on Dallas, excuse me, but it just feels like there's too many. yes, the ceiling is very high with that group. But I also feel like there's a ton of question marks about some of those pieces. And I like Tyler Booker, but again, I'm also aware.
To me, it's also an infrastructure thing, right? It's like, what is Brian Schottenheimer as a head coach, OC, like what they don't have the coaching staff they used to there.
And that's a good point.
And also, what's the play calling going to look like? Because that's another thing. It's like, in theory, I think they want to push the ball down the field vertically. Like, that's why you go get George Pickens. That takes time. Is that going to wind up being a huge issue for this offensive line?
Yeah, and I think the other thing, too, is you bring up a great point. Like, are they going to – which situation is the best for them? So I would say Jayden Daniels, because that quickly gets the ball out of his hand, is probably one of the better situations, better quarterbacks to be blocking for. You're not going to give up a lot of sacks, not going to give up a lot of pressures. Dak holds the ball a little bit, not as much as Russell Wilson. So even though on paper that offensive line is probably fine, like statistically, are they going to come across as being worse? Because they've got a rookie quarterback, they've got a guy who holds the ball a lot, and they've got Jameis Winston who could potentially be playing back there. And to me, none of those sound like great people to elevate that group. Yeah. So maybe on paper they end up being worse, or at the end of the season they end up being worse because of the quarterback situation. But I think on paper, I'm the most leery of the Dallas one.
All right, so for the graphic, if you will, it is Philadelphia, Washington, New York, Dallas. Take Command Podcast. That's Logan Paulson. I'm Craig Hoffman. Let's see if we can get a better name in the third segment here, Logan. It's our NFC East positional group rankings. That was pretty smooth. I'll take that.
Very smooth.
All right. So what we have left are the skill positions, as they are called. Wide receiver, tight end, we're going to do together, and then running backs at the end separate. So when you look at the group of skill position players in total, Logan, I do think we're probably going to get an Eagles logo at the top of the graphic again, because A.J. Brown, there is an argument to be made. He is the best receiver in the NFL. I know Trevor Sycamore was making that argument earlier in the offseason. You look at a bunch of the statistics, the underlying data. Over the last 3 years, he's been as good, as consistent as Jamar Chase, as Justin Jefferson, some of the yards per catch or yards per target, stuff like that. So you have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert at tight end. Then I think you do get obviously some depth questions with, whether it's Jahan Dotson or Grant Calcaterra at tight end. Like, you start getting down, they don't have the depth, but I think their ceiling and their top end stuff elevates that group far and away above, maybe not far and away, but above Dallas, Washington, and certainly New York.
Yeah, I think the only other one I would kind of maybe call attention to is Dallas, and it's because you have CeeDee Lamb, who again is in that kind of conversation for being a top 8 receiver in the NFL, wherever he is.
Yeah,
and
I would even say higher than that, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying conservatively, maybe 8, right? And then George Pickens, who is a little bit of a crash out, but is one of the best deep ball contested catch guys in the NFL, right? So, what does he do for that offense? And obviously Jalen Tolbert, who to me is one of the most electric slot players in the NFL, period. So all of a sudden you look at that and you kind of say, well, and then Jake Ferguson is a guy that I like. I don't know if I'd put him above Goddard after the year Goddard had last year. Yeah, I think last year we had him flipped because, Goddard was coming off an injury, but I do think that is an interesting group. Now, are any of those guys better than Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, and Jahan Dotson? I don't think so, but I think it's much closer with this group than it was in years past, for example. For
sure. Kevontae Turpin is he's purely a kick returner basically, but he'll do something on offense in 3 games on the year. He'll get a screen pass and get you a key first down, something like that. Yeah, man, it's interesting with the depth of Philly just being so lacking. Jahan, they haven't had a third wide receiver seemingly forever, but I also think that's kind of hurts and kind of the offense. They like the outside stuff so much. When you're a slot receiver and you operate over the middle of the field, then Jalen Hurts probably ain't gonna throw the ball to you a whole ton. Right. And so, they use their tight ends on the outside quite a bit, where they'll get, or up a seam or whatever. They get Goddard vertical up the field, and that's where he's dangerous. So they're good fits in terms of what they want to do offensively. Washington, to me, is the wild card here because Terry was obviously incredible last year, played at a top 10 level. Debo, what is he? He is the wild card. Zach was so much better than we thought he was going to be. And if he's that, he's right up there as one of the best tight ends in the division. Very different than Dallas Goedert, which is, of course, ironic, but he's
I think I would
weapon.
rate him as being the best tight end in the division last year because of his ability to win in critical situations, red zone, third down, win against man to man. Like nobody else was able to do what he did. So I think he's a tremendous weapon. But I do think the interesting part is the Debo thing. Like, where is he at? Terry obviously is a very, very good player. Like we saw what he did last year, really tremendous effort by him. And if Noah Brown was healthy, I might kick around the idea of putting them kind of in the same bucket as Dallas. But with Noah's injury where it's at, I'm a little uncertain about this group. And again,
same thing with Gallup, right? And Jalen Lane's a rookie. Like there's just a lot of, Luke, like if Luke is the player we saw the last couple of weeks in the spring, like we have an interesting conversation because he was really effective. And all of a sudden this becomes the deepest group. Because I think that's the other part too, is right. Like who else in this division has a impact skill position guy like John Bates, where like he is a massive factor in the run game.
Sure.
And so like, I think you could convince yourself, if you want to, Washington fans listening, if you want to convince yourself that you're number 2 here, or that if Debo is going to be awesome, could you, with the depth and the lack of depth in Philly, like be on the same level? I think you could make a compelling argument. I just don't know that I'm ready to do that. Dallas is interesting because I just have no love for George Pickens.
No,
I understand. Like, as I've said about George Pickens before, on any single snap, he's the greatest player in NFL history.
Correct.
Like his spectacular catch rating on Madden is 1,000. He's so ridiculously good. But you can't crash out every other game and be totally ineffective and hurt your team. And that's kind of what he's been the last like 2-3 years. And so I don't even know whether to count, like acknowledging he could be the best receiver in the entire division if he's got his head on straight. He's that talented. He might be a negative for the Cowboys. Like I literally don't know. So I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree. It's a big question mark. And I think the other one too, like you were talking about depth for Philly, like, and I think they've done a good job of drafting, like Johnny Wilson, for example, developmental X wide receiver. Terrence Marshall, the guy that was the second round pick for the Panthers a couple of years ago, is in camp this year. Like Aeneas Smith was that great return specialist. So like, even though there's not like household names, like their depth is pretty solid. So even though like it seems like AJ Brown and friends, like they have some interesting pieces there. But the George Pickens thing to me is so interesting. We were talking about this before we started. Like, it's the most interesting, almost the most interesting storyline from a skill position standpoint in the division. Like, it's so compelling because if he's good, if he's involved in the offense, if he's catching footballs down the field, like that offense has real teeth to it.
I mean, think of the years that Dak had that were awesome. He's got like Brandon, like it doesn't have to be amazing players. You need someone to take the top off to let CeeDee Lamb unlock the full potential of his powers. And it's been Michael Gallup. It's been Brandon Cooks. It's been a couple different guys. Pickens, in theory, is better than all of them dudes, but he also is George Pickens.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to put it. And so, I guess like maybe you say, I mean, it's interesting kind of walking through it because there are some similar questions about Debo over the course of the season, but they're different. They're not personality related. They're, weight related. They're health related. Like he hasn't been healthy for a couple of years now in a row. Like, again, like he just plays in such a physical manner. Like, is he an upgrade in this offense? Absolutely. But what is his availability going to be? And again, like I like Debo. Like I've never had more fun watching a guy's film than watching Debo when he became a Washington Commander. Like, the way you can use him, like what he can do, like his physicality, like he's wired the right way. But is he going to be there for 16? Is he going to be there for 5? Like, what are we dealing with there?
Yeah.
And so I think that becomes another question in a different way from George Pickens. And I think when you start doing the math like that, like you see how similar Dallas and Washington actually are in terms of skill position groups.
I do think it's worth saying, I think New York has slowly but surely built an okay stable of weapons. They're 4th in this, but like Giants fans are going to hate the graphic, or I mean, they hate their team, so they might be like, yeah, but it's not like they're in a different stratosphere away from Washington and Dallas. Malik Neighbors is awesome. He's as good as any of these other top guys from a talent standpoint, and we'll see what he is in year 2 because the way he just rapidly got better and better last season was very impressive. Wan'Dale Robinson's kind of a one-trick pony, but Darius Slayton, who hilariously it feels like they've been trying to trade for 3 years, they re-signed in the offseason, is just solid. Zach Pascal has been a guy that's floated around. I remember covering him when he was here as like a training camp player, basically, and then he pops up in Indy, and you're like, wait, that dude's still in the league? And here he is. He's still in the league, making catches. And then tight end, like Theo Johnson's an interesting prospect. Daniel Bellinger's been like a solid player. Chris Manhertz is like, a Logan Paulson type of player, in both you're a fan of and what you were as a player. So they've got an interesting group, and the cupboard is much less bare in New York than it feels like it's been in years past.
I think it all turns around Malik Neighbors. Like he at moments last year looked like just a really special prospect. Now he's got some health stuff that he's been negotiating too in terms of concussion. And again, I think the reason this is probably lower than it actually, and the talent is because of quarterback situation. Like I do not have confidence that they'll be able to maximize Malik Neighbors on a down basis. Even Theo Johnson, who at points last year looked like, again, doesn't catch the football super well, but he's big. He's got this kind of Gronkowski-esque frame working up the seam. Like I'm not confident that they're going to be able to maximize that skill set. Shelton, I think being able to take the top off, also kind of a one-trick pony. There's not a lot of diversity. In the same way when you look at like Philly, it's like A.J. Brown can win in a multitude of ways. Devontae Smith can win in a multitude of ways. Even Dallas, like, CeeDee Lamb can win in a multitude of ways, right? Terry, same thing. And then all of a sudden you get there and it's like, well, what are we actually going to be here offensively? And I think maybe that uncertainty around the quarterback spot makes that feel a little bit worse than it actually is.
I think that's a great point, because like if you tell me Jayden's the quarterback with this receiver group, I probably feel not that different than depending on what Neighbors is, right? Like Neighbors to Terry. Like Terry's a better player right now because Terry's experienced and knows what he's doing. We'll see how much longer that lasts.
Like this is, I don't want to piss people off, but I do feel like Neighbors has a better ceiling. He's got a Justin Jefferson type movement skill. Like that is in his range of outcomes. So I think that's like,
he is a stick of dynamite. Like that kid's crazy.
Yeah.
So when the rubber meets the road here for the graphic, Philadelphia.
And then
who are you putting it to?
I'm going to say the Commanders because of Zach. And now there's another big question there too. Because if Zach's not healthy, then this list changes dramatically. But
he was healthy. All teams could have injuries. If Neighbors is hurt, then the Giants, literally get flushed down the toilet. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, and I think that just speaks to how good Zach was last year. Because we know what Terry is. I think Debo's still a question mark, but I think that'll be a positive thing for the group. Just Zach was just that good at the position last year.
I think the other thing for the Commanders is I feel like they have enough other pieces that like someone's going to be all right. Like if not someone's. Like I don't know whether, and maybe it's week to week. Maybe it's Luke one week and Jalen Lane the next, and like they'll find someone who makes a play here and there. And like, New York's got a little bit of that too. Guys like Lil Jordan Humphrey, Jalen Hyatt, who I've neglected to mention. I don't feel as good about that with Philadelphia or with Dallas. And I just the crash out factor of
you're like banking on a negative George Pickens. Like you're hedging hard against the negative,
some of the best takes of my sports media career have been hedging hard on negative stuff, exactly like George Pickens. Like my claim to fame when I was working in Dallas was I was the guy who the second the Mavs traded for Rajon Rondo, I was like, that's a bad idea. And I've never been more right about anything in my whole life. And so sometimes I probably go a little hard on that stuff, personal bias, but I've also had a good track record with it. So
sure.
We'll see. All right, last but not least, skill position wise, the running backs in this division. Man, the Eagles are really going to sweep this, huh?
Yeah, they are going to sweep it. Dude, because I was just looking at we're getting ready for the show, looking through the rosters, doing a little research. A.J. Dillon's the backup running back there.
Yeah.
Who is a big, physical, downhill guy. And I just think it talk about perfect complement to Saquon. Like, it doesn't get much better than that. Like, it doesn't give the defense a break. It's like the true thunder and lightning combination, and he's done it. There's been years where he's looked really good. I think he's coming off of an injury, if I'm not mistaken. But running behind that offensive line with that body type, and Saquon is the other element back there. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know, man. Like, he can catch the football. He's a good pass protector. Obviously, Saquon is the dude right now. He's one of the two best running backs in football, depending on who you ask. But yeah, man, I don't know how you say it's not Philadelphia at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Saquon himself makes it it's easy unless Derrick Henry's in your division. There's not a
And then
conversation.
they got Will Shipley too, man.
Yeah, Shipley's probably going to be RB2. We'll see. I mean, Dylan's interesting. So he didn't play at all last year.
Yeah,
and then
hurt, right?
2023, he only averaged 3.4 yards a carry. So it's been a while since he's been good. But also, if you're remotely close to a good NFL running back and you're playing behind Philly's O-line, then it seems like you should be able to do some things. Dallas no longer is totally barren in the running back category. Congrats, Cowboys. You signed some running backs. Javonte Williams, who has been really good for Denver, but they were obviously willing to let go. Miles Sanders.
He had his I'm trying to remember. His rookie year was really, really good. And then he tore his ACL, I want to say, and then never quite got back to the same level. So a guy that was a second-round pick, really excellent football player, but hasn't quite gotten healthy the same way that he was whatever that was.
That rookie year, 2021, he had almost 1,000 yards. He was 903 yards, averaged 4.4 a carry, and he has been only played 4 games 2022, and then as he's come back, he hasn't hit 4 yards a carry yet. So they're certainly hoping he regains form.
You're betting on potential there, and again, Jayden Blue is the guy they drafted at LSU, kind of a hyper fast, explosive, pass catching kind of guy, like not an every down player, but adds a little bit of juice to the offense. Miles Sanders, I've never been the biggest fan of his, but is a serviceable NFL running back. Probably not at this point in his career. Film off as a rookie, that big kind of body type guys. But there's nothing in here that says, oh, this guy's going to carry us, right? You got a guy coming off who's never returned to form post-injury. You got a very situational player. You got an older Miles Sanders. So I don't love Dallas in this department. But
somehow it's better than they were last year.
It is, yeah. I'd agree with that. I think it is better than they were last year.
New York's actually got a decent little room. Tyrone Tracy was one of the nice surprises of the NFL last year. Late round running back who really popped and is a good player. Devin Singletary, you put him in a backup role. Cool. Cam Scatterbo, depends on what you think of Cam Scatterbo.
Yeah.
I know Sycamore loved him. Other people had him as RB15 in this draft. And then Washington obviously has Robinson, Eckler, McNichols, Rodriguez still floating around, Bill, who they drafted. And we obviously know more about all the Washington guys, but if Eckler is what he was last year and Robinson is what he was last year even, and McNichols, that was a solid room. I think Philly is the obvious one because of Saquon. Is New York actually the second best running back room here?
I was just about to say that. I think it is. And I think
is Tracy the second best back in the division?
I think so. And it's close between him and B-Rob, I think. But I think when you look at what Tracy did last year, the way he ran, the way he caught the football, what he brought to that offense, he's a special player. Now, can he do it 2 years in a row? I don't know. But in terms of what he did last year, you remember watching that second game up in New York, he was the offense. And everyone knew he was getting the ball and no one could stop him. He's got this nice shifty one-cut ability. He runs hard, gets behind his pads. I think he's a great football player. And Devin Singletary is a good football player. He's a starting caliber player, that is, I think, probably more of a rotational guy. But he's a good player, and
he's an above average standard NFL running back. There's nothing special about Devin Singletary, but he'll do the job.
And then Cam Scatterbo, I didn't love him the way Sycamore loved him, but I think he's a good player. And is he your third guy, then I think you feel pretty good about that room, So again, our room, I think the Commanders' room, I think is excellent. B-Rob, love him. Eckler, I think was a difference maker, last year in terms of the offense. I want to see what Merritt brings. I love Chris Rodriguez. I love Nichols. I love all those guys, but is there anybody that has the ceiling of Tracy in that room?
To me, Eckler's the wild card here. If Eckler is a big play merchant like he was last year, then the Commanders, with what B-Rob is, an improved offensive line, et cetera, I think there's a really good chance that the Commanders finish second behind the Eagles here. If Eckler even takes a marginal step back, then I think what the Giants, now again, it's going to be hard because of the production. We talked about the O-lines, et cetera. But I think from a pure talent standpoint, Tracy probably gets out. We'll throw Giants fans a bone here. I think that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna throw you a bone, Giants fans. Although they haven't finished last in everything, which is nice. Philly, unfortunately, is gonna finish atop everything. We're gonna go Philly.
Isn't that crazy though? Isn't that crazy how good that roster is? Every time we do this exercise.
Well, I guess except for quarterback, which is an important piece.
It's an important piece, but when it just speaks to if you can build a team with the best offensive line in football, best running back, best receiving duo. Like, you can get away with a lot. Like,
and next week's not going to be that much different. Like, in terms of the defense, like their defense might be better than their offense, which that feels great.
That's exciting.
Happy June, everybody. So in terms of the running backs, Philly, New York, Washington, Dallas.
Yeah, I think New York. Yeah, I think New York.
Philly, New York, Washington, Dallas. Printed on the graphic. All right, that's our show. Of course, we'll leave your feedback, and I'm sure there will be, in the comment section if you're watching us on YouTube. Monday, we already have a bunch of great mailbag questions, some good, funny, creative ones, even one that was self-identified as stupid, but it was the correct amount of stupid, and I'm very excited to answer it. So we will get to that on the mailbag edition of the show to start next week, but you can still submit your questions, hoffmanshow.com, or use Instagram at hoffman.sports or at Logan_Paulson82. For Logan, I'm Craig. We'll see you next time. Have a great weekend. This has been Take Command.